Hi everyone, it's Rob Watson, the module leader for TECH3022 social media practice, and this is a short overview video of the topics that we're covering in the fifth lecture of our program. And this is about data collection. This is about the idea of how we can go about gathering data. We've kind of established the basis on the reasons for why we're gathering data, so the kind of the social purpose. So looking at the obesity, diabetes crisis, the sugar problem. And then we've also talked about how we conceptualize this problem as something that exists in a social setting. So it's people. It's an issue of people's life worlds and experiences, and a day-to-day experience of relationships and identity formation. We've talked about these things in kind of some abstract concepts to go with at the moment. We've also thought about how this works online in terms of using ethnography as a form of investigation, which sees online life in a similar way or the same way as it would be a face-to-face social space as well. So the symbolic space of the internet we're regarding as much as a social life world as we would be the face-to-face interactions of people acting in the real world, to use a phrase. In this lecture, what I want to do is just really cover some issues about how we can shape that in terms of gathering data. So what it is we're looking for in terms of building up a picture, a kind of more holistic picture of what is being said and discussed and people are contemplating and engaging with. So we need to think about gathering data on the basis that we're looking for to understand people's perceptions and what their expectations about the role of processed carbohydrate-based food might be. So as we've kind of used this language, we've started to introduce this language of things like the knowledge that people have that is assumed, that is tacit, that's kind of not clearly identified, but it's passed on from person to person, that we learn from person to person, but probably isn't written down somewhere. You don't go and study a course to learn to drink energy drinks. You don't go on a course. You get that from advertising, you get that from your peers, you get that from social networks, from social communication. So this is both an external process and also an internal process of interpretation. So what we do is we kind of make sense, how do we make sense of the roles that we play and the particular lines of action that we might contemplate engaging with that allow us to form relationships, that allow us to continue to play a role in a social role, and give us a sense of social organisation. So what we do as an ethnographer or a netnographer, as we should be thinking about ourselves, those who study life on the net, is that we think about we need to conduct our observations by taking notes, by what do we mean by the role of being an observer? What does it mean to be observed? We need to talk to people, but do we do that in a formal way or do we do that in an informal way? And how do we note and make sense of what people tell us, and how do we tune in to what people tell us, not just in terms of the words that they use, but the emotionality that comes from behind their expression, their kind of the preference for certain types of expression as opposed to other more alternative forms of expression or more narrow forms of expression. So how do we kind of write that up? How do we record it? How do we write that up? How do we keep a journal about the activities, the research activities that we're engaged in? So we need to start to think about the how we're going to conduct the research that we'll undertake, that will inform the later project, which is to devise and put together a research proposal based on a particular focus group that you're of people, that you're a community, a network of people that you're interested in changing or influencing their opinions about sugar and carbohydrates. So we're going to do this by collecting different types of media. We're going to do this by looking at the themes of I think it kind of wraps into around the kind of themes of food and nutritional literacy. We introduced last week in the workshop the idea of literacy, about where do you learn about your diet, where do you learn about food. So we've got a kind of set of questions, and what are the kind of concepts that people have? These might be, if you like, background questions that we need to ask people. So what are the kind of concepts that people have about food, and why is it that some products stand in for food when they're not food? It's very interesting. Look at things like e-cigarettes and the flavours that are sold for e-cigarettes. It's a synthetic product, which is a drug, effectively. It's nicotine based, and yet it's marketed, and we should look at this, it's marketed as a food. It's cherries, apple pie. It's really interesting coffee flavour, how it kind of is a synthetic stand-in for food. Likewise, look at pet food, which isn't designed for human consumption, and so therefore can be sold by different criteria. It serves a similar function but in a different way, and it's interesting to look at the kind of iconography of these products. So what are the characteristics of our food literacies? What is it that shapes them? What is it that gives them a kind of, how do we describe at this time, at this moment, what our food literacy consists of? And we can do that by looking back in the past at different periods that tell us about different moments where people had different concepts of food literacy, and how that changes over time through technology, through transport, through the role of women in the home, through manual labour. There's a whole load of relationships that inform that. So where do our sense of food literacy comes from? It comes from a community sense. We learn it within our communities. We learn it amongst ourselves. And that is the dominant way that we learn about food, but it's been shaped instead by advertising and by promotion and marketing and kind of industrialized products. So there's a whole set of issues that we can look at, which we can develop as a research question. So one of the things I hope we can come out with, or at least start to think about in kind of concrete terms, is what our question is going to be that we're going to try and work with, that will inform us, so that when we do get to the point of putting together the project where we use the social media to try and influence people, that we've done that on the basis of having a question which we can develop an answer for. So, and it's along the lines of how is it that people regard food in this way as opposed to another way? But we'll figure that out. Research questions are quite difficult to grasp. I never find them very easy to do at all. So it's we'll work through that, and we'll put something together which is achievable, so that in the short period of time that we've got up till Christmas, we know that we can crack on with the work to get this settled down. Anyway, I've rattled on for far too long as usual. I'll see you at the lecture on Monday afternoon, and I'm enjoying the sunshine. Look at it, it's lovely. So anyway, speak to you soon.